His name is forever linked to the 1930s through the 1950s, the era of America's big style, long cars, prohibition, and gangsters. Sinatra became an icon early on, a generational idol, and he remains one to this day. Of all American pop stars, his reputation was arguably the most scandalous, but that never held him back. Most notably, Frank Sinatra was the very first sex symbol in American pop culture, both overt and secret. Frank's velvet, mesmerizing voice sent his female fans into raptures. Stadiums applauded his talent. But ironically, things could have turned out very differently, and the world might never have heard of the legendary singer. Because aside from his passion for music, Sinatra harbored another obsession, a hidden, almost manic drive. According to Sinatra biographer J. Randy Taraborelli, he could fairly be described as a sexual maniac. The singer was fixated on his own virility. Sinatra, the only son of a well-known New Jersey bootlegger who also ran an underground abortion clinic, took immense pride in the size of his manhood. And this wasn't just bravado. After one night with Sinatra, actress Ava Gardner ended up in the hospital with tissue damage. Those who didn't land in the ER typically walked away quite satisfied. Sinatra's former high school girlfriends, now respectable elderly ladies, still blush when they recall their encounters with him. One of them, now living out her days quietly in Philadelphia, was just 13 at the time. It seemed, she sighs, Frank did nothing but make love, passionately and indiscriminately. He was incredibly sensual, and no one kissed like he did. How could you ever forget something like that? But it wasn't just about sex. Sinatra was obsessed with women. I can have sex with myself, he'd tell his lovers, but with you, we'll make love. He could be cruel or tender, and small-town girls melted in his arms. Still, he would leave them without a second glance. That hurt. Singer Antoinette de la Pinta even sued him for breach of promise, claiming Sinatra had seduced her, lived with her, and then abandoned her, pregnant and heartbroken. During the trial, it came out that the poor victim had long since been married. Sinatra wielded not just his masculine pride with gusto, but also his fists. And they packed a punch. His father was a firefighter by trade, but a street brawler by nature. Constantly getting into fights, Sinatra Sr. had decent boxing skills and usually came out on top. He taught his son how to move in the ring and throw a punch, a skill that would save Frank more than once. He was short, slight, and deeply insecure as a young man. His sexual exploits weren't due to his looks or stature. They came from an unstoppable energy, an overpowering sexual drive that made him impossible to turn down. His peers resented the erotic adventures of the scrawny Italian kid, and they didn't hide it. That's when Sinatra would show off his famous swing with his fists. On the streets, he earned respect. The guys he ran with in bars and alleyways were gradually getting into men's business. Racketeering, stick-ups, bootlegging. Those early connections would prove extremely useful to Frank later in life, though at the time, he had no clue what lay ahead. He simply craved the thrill of it all. He worked as a waiter in a bar, dabbled in sports journalism, chased every skirt he saw, and on top of that, he sang. At birth, the future sex symbol entered the world feet first. The doctor used forceps badly and ruptured his eardrum in the process. It didn't stop him. Sinatra started performing in the nightclubs of his hometown, Hoboken. Then came regional tours, and eventually, a radio gig. What followed was a phenomenon. At his shows, teenage girls screamed, fainted, and lost their minds. The small-town playboy became an object of obsession, the beginnings of a cult that would grow into full-blown hysteria. He had a remarkable voice, a soft, lyrical baritone that seemed to flow without a breath. Sinatra used a rare vocal technique. His pauses for breath were almost imperceptible, as if he was anticipating each next note before it came. But it wasn't just his technique. It was the raw, magnetic masculinity in his voice that drove women crazy. And Sinatra knew it. He was the first pop idol to sensually lick the microphone while singing. That little move drove his fans wild. They'd scream and rush the stage. During the Great Depression, everything collapsed, except the entertainment industry. Movie theaters were packed, concert halls overflowed, and even hard candies sold well. A desperate public longed for light, for beauty, and Sinatra's love songs hit the spot. He became wealthy, wore $200 shoes and $500 silk suits, the kind of money a poor family could live on for half a year. He was welcomed into high society. But the bootlegger's son from Hoboken didn't exactly have refined tastes. Italian-American Sinatra quickly found common ground with the Italian-American Mafia. And the Mafia was part of the American big style too. Mobsters helped shape the nation's mythology, starring in movies and books, even influencing fashion. A double-breasted suit, a Borsellino hat, a tie darker than the jacket, a shirt darker than the tie, a gold Parker pen, a diamond-studded watch. A man dressed like that radiated power. And power was something Sinatra chased his whole life. He began to feel like a superhuman early on, and he started living like he owed no one anything. By that time, he was already married. It happened almost by accident. He was 18 walking down the street when he saw Nancy Barbato, a charming young Italian girl, sitting on the porch painting her nails. Sinatra called out, "Hey, what about me? Give me a manicure too, baby." No one remembers exactly what Nancy replied, but that moment sparked a romance that lasted 4 years and ended in marriage. They shared good times and bad. Nancy was truly ready to walk through life with him. For someone as self-centered as Sinatra, this was both shocking and touching. He genuinely loved his wife, and for a while, even stayed faithful. But it wasn't easy. His concerts were packed with gorgeous, screaming fans who were ready for anything. Hollywood stars were more than happy to start affairs with Sinatra. Though Nancy gave birth to 2 children, Nancy Jr. and Frank Jr., her husband was rarely home. Life was smiling on him, and he was eager to soak it all in. First one scandalous affair, then another and another. Sinatra seduced and discarded women without a thought. He didn't see, or didn't care, what they were doing to him. His life began to spiral downward, and he didn't even notice when he crossed into self-destruction. To the average American, Frank Sinatra was a family man, a loving husband with a beautiful wife and 2 adorable children. But one morning, that same American opens the newspaper and learns that Sinatra is now living with stunning Marilyn Maxwell, one of Hollywood's most breathtaking blondes. A month later, the tabloids announce he's madly in love with Lana Turner, the screen goddess made famous by The Postman Always Rings Twice, and he throws away his Sinatra concert tickets. Ticket sales plummeted. Sinatra barely seemed to care. Lana Turner was worth it. She was considered the most glamorous woman in America, a knockout body, dazzling diamonds, and furs to die for. Sinatra chased her for over a year, finally won her over, and nearly destroyed his family in the process. He rented her a house. She hated it. That only fueled his desire more. He left his wife, but after just 2 weeks with his golden-haired conquest, Sinatra grew bored. He returned to Nancy and the kids. From that point on, Lana Turner cursed his name at every opportunity. Then came Ava Gardner. Sinatra saw a photo of her not long after celebrating his son's birthday and blurted out, "I'm going to marry that woman." He sent her a bouquet of white roses. Friends begged Ava Gardner not to go through with it. By then, Sinatra had a reputation as a walking disaster, someone who burned everything and everyone around him. But Ava couldn't help herself. Hollywood's leading lady had a fatal weakness. Despite being strong-willed and fiercely in control of her destiny, she had a soft spot for broken men. And Sinatra, deep in one of the darkest crises of his life, was as broken as they came. He was suffering, and she rushed in to help. She felt sorry for Frank Sinatra and ended up in his bed. Ava gave in, and the whole country turned against her. People believed she had seduced poor Frank. Children prayed for sweet, abandoned Nancy Sinatra. Housewives sent Gardner hate mail, but neither she nor Frank gave the slightest damn. In 1951, Sinatra and Nancy divorced. He married Ava Gardner. But Ava still occasionally saw her ex-husband, Artie Shaw. Frank, meanwhile, had his share of flings, and yet both were wildly jealous. Their marriage was chaos. Ava had fits of rage. Sinatra coughed up blood from the stress. After 6 years of emotional torment, Frank finally walked out, his nerves shot, his spirit exhausted. They split, but even then, they never stopped loving each other. Then came Marilyn Monroe, delicate, gentle Marilyn, whom Sinatra once publicly ordered to get her fat ass out of the living room. After her, there was Lauren Bacall, widow of Humphrey Bogart. Then Kim Novak, the Hollywood star. Then Jacqueline Kennedy, the president's widow. Then Mia Farrow, whom Sinatra divorced exactly 1 year after their wedding. Eventually, he surrounded himself with a personal harem. At his wild bachelor parties, each guest would leave the night with a tall beauty, while Sinatra disappeared into his bedroom with 5 women at once. By that point, things had truly taken a turn for the worse. He drank heavily, and it showed. He grew bloated, puffy, and sluggish. He got hooked on tranquilizers, which wrecked his temperament. His reputation was in ruins. The press constantly fed the public stories about his endless affairs. And then there were his late-night joyrides. Frank cruising around in a convertible, shooting out store windows with a revolver. Each of these escapades cost him $20,000, $18,000 in hush money and damages, $2,000 to replace the glass. He was slowly losing his mind. One night, trying to scare a girlfriend, he nearly shot himself. He began losing his voice and developed a paralyzing fear of going on stage. His agent and best friend, George Evans, who had begged him for years to zip up his pants and get his act together, died of a heart attack after one of Sinatra's many meltdowns. He desperately needed a comeback, something loud enough to drown out all the scandal. But by the early 1950s, no producer wanted to touch him. He was finished. And yet, everything changed thanks to a favor he'd done nearly a decade earlier for a very dangerous man. At one point, Frank had personally delivered $2 million in cash to Havana and handed it over to none other than public enemy number 1, the infamous gangster Lucky Luciano. The two became friends. Now it was Luciano's turn to return the favor. This very story would later be retold with some creative twists, in Mario Puzo's iconic novel, The Godfather. Luciano didn't need to send any horseheads to producers. One phone call was enough. Sinatra landed the role in From Here to Eternity, won an Oscar, and made a triumphant return to the Hollywood establishment. From then on, he played it smart. If he sinned, it wasn't in front of polite society. His new partners in pleasure were the Kennedy brothers, with whom he shared a stunning, long-legged Irish woman named Judith Campbell. Sinatra started focusing on business. His production company, Kent Productions, thrived. He had everything a man could dream of. But fate wasn't done with him yet. The years of excess had taken their toll. Sinatra's legendary virility began to fade. He tried testosterone therapy, but it didn't help. And that's when, at 55, he fell in love. Her name was Barbara Marx, a former model and mediocre dancer, 29 years his junior. She went along with everything, got along with his friends, and never complained. Sinatra's aging mother, Dolly, called her a whore to her face, and Barbara just quietly wiped away tears. She knew her place, and Frank liked that. They married in 1976. Bit by bit, both Sinatra and his business empire passed into Barbara's soft, capable hands. She made sure his children from his first marriage received as little as possible from his $200 million fortune. A silent war raged over his bank accounts, priceless art collection, and the rights to his musical legacy. Sinatra would sometimes explode, screaming, throwing ashtrays and vases at her. But then he'd soften again, staring into Barbara's eyes like a boy. Even her son from a previous marriage received a piece of the inheritance. A grandnephew of Karl Marx, no less. The women had won. The old Sinatra was gone. Barbara embraced her role as the wife of a legend, surrounded by stylists, masseurs, and hairdressers, always in the finest clothes. Meanwhile, Frank wanted just one thing: to be left alone. She handled the business, organized lunches, hosted meetings and guests, while the bloated old man quietly played with his beloved model train set. He no longer wanted anything, chased nothing, and tried not to think at all. All that remained of the old Sinatra was that voice, drifting out from every record store, and really that was the best part of him.